effort again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
-15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Annie Klaff, coming at you with a special non-Wednesday breaking news episode of the Bird's Nest. The Orioles have added to their starting rotation with Chris Bassitt joining the team on a one-year deal. We're going to break it all down here on this episode. Annie, the last time on the podcast, it was a little melancholy. We were talking about the injuries to Jackson Holliday, to Jordan Westberg. It was a little bit of a downer despite the start of spring training. This gets the juice back a little bit. I don't know if we're all the way there. The injuries are still a bummer, but the juice is back a little with a big-time signing.
Yeah, it definitely kind of feels like one of those episodes where it encapsulates the offseason a little bit because you know, now you're getting into spring training and it's starting and ramping up more and you have position players reporting next week and everything. But you were still kind of iffy even last time around, or I guess the last episode when we were talking about injuries. You were still iffy because it didn't feel like that they were done with this offseason. Right. They felt like there was still a big hole in the starting rotation, and this a little bit solidifies it and, like you said, brings some more energy back into the room, into the bird's nest, if you will, and also down in Sarasota. So it should be very interesting seeing how the Orioles go from here on out in Sarasota. Obviously, Chris Bassitt will be reporting there soon, and that was one of the kind of reservations that Mike Elias alluded to with the media over Zoom this week, was that you kind of know what you're getting yourself into when you sign a starting pitcher during spring training. So hopefully they did this early on enough where Bassitt can get immersed into the clubhouse atmosphere and get ready for the new season.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there was kind of a feeling that the Orioles were not done in the starting rotation, which is weird considering the fact that pitchers and catchers have already reported. So that was a bit of a strange feeling. I think if there's anybody who is probably going to feel comfortable coming into a clubhouse a little bit later on in the process after spring training has started, it's probably a veteran like Chris Bassitt, who is now entering his age 37 season. But I think the Orioles are probably done in the starting rotation for now. I think there's a chance that they could potentially add to the bullpen down the stretch, whether that's smaller moves or a larger move remains to be seen. But I think the starting rotation moves are probably done outside of maybe some depth moves here or there.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, whether you consider Chris Bassitt a splash move or not, like I think that the Orioles splash moves for the offseason are complete. You mentioned that they might add some more into the bullpen, but that would probably be a lesser degree of a deal. And I think that when you kind of take a step back and rate the Orioles offseason so far, like I would say that they won the offseason. They're basically probably one of the MLB's winners this offseason, just given that you got Ryan Helsley, you got Taylor Ward, Pete Alonso, Andrew Kittredge, Chris Bassitt, Zach Eflin. Like, that's a lot of pieces that you add to this team in 2026 that make it better than it was going into 2025.
Yeah, the rotation specifically, you add Bassitt, Zach Eflin, Shane Baz, and then in the lineup, you're adding Pete Alonso, Taylor Ward, like you mentioned, the bullpen adds Ryan Helsley, Andrew Kittredge. All in all, the Orioles have now guaranteed more than $200 million in free agent signings between Bassitt, Alonso, Helsley, and Eflin. And it is a splash based on the reported size of the contract. It is a one-year deal, but it is still a larger deal on the one-year side of things. So let's start with getting into just who Chris Bassitt is as a starting pitcher. Then we'll talk about what it means for the rotation and what it means for the team overall moving forward and their potential moves. Bassitt, as mentioned, entering his age 37 season, it's going to be his 12th year in the league. What are you getting in him as a pitcher? Dependability. He's made at least 27 starts in each of the last 5 seasons, including 30 or more in the last 4 seasons. Over that 4-season stretch, it's over 880 innings, a 3.66 ERA, 8.5 Ks per nine, and under 3 walks per nine. He's one of 4 pitchers in baseball to have at least 170 innings over the last 4 seasons. It's not going to be an ERA in the 2s or the low 3s. It's probably going to be a mid to high 3s ERA from Chris Bassitt, but he is going to post every 5th day. He is going to eat innings, and that is incredibly valuable given the state of the rotation at this point, where you have Bradish, Rogers, and Eflin all coming off of seasons where they dealt with injury.
Yeah, and I think that the veteran experience is huge here, and it's going to be different than it was last year when we saw Charlie Morton come into the starting rotation last offseason. That, I've already seen comparisons to this deal to that over social media. I think it's very different because it's a different caliber type of pitcher.
Yeah, it's not that.
Obviously, no hate to Charlie Morton. Like, he had a huge turnaround last year as an Oriole, but I think that when you got Charlie Morton, he was 41 years old. Chris Bassitt right now is only 36. You could have gone out and gotten Justin Verlander or Max Scherzer in free agency this year, and they would have been over 40 years old too. So I think Chris Bassitt is a different tier, very much more so than Charlie Morton. What you did get out of Charlie Morton was consistency. He was also very similar. The 4 seasons prior to coming into Baltimore, he also had posted 30 or more starts and had a fairly decent ERA. But with Chris Bassitt, it's just a different kind of caliber. An 11-year MLB veteran with postseason experience. He did come out of relief for the Blue Jays this past postseason, but 8 2/3 innings pitched this year with 1 earned run in the playoffs, and then a 3.04 ERA in 23 2/3 career playoff innings. A 3-time Cy Young finisher, so 8th in 2020, 10th in 2021, and 10th in 2023, and then an all-star as well. So I think that with Chris Bassitt, you're getting someone that has a little bit more dependability out of a rotation that's fairly young and hasn't had that much experience because of injury, and then also someone that is a higher caliber veteran than a Charlie Morton that you got last year.
Yeah, he's a floor raiser. I think, the Charlie Morton comparisons, yeah, okay, fine. They are both older starting pitchers, but as you mentioned, there is a 5-year age gap between when you were signing those two guys. Not going to say there was any writing on the wall for Charlie Morton going into 2025, but there certainly were some concerns. His last 10 games of 2024 for Charlie Morton, it was a 4.73 ERA. Going into last year, the curveball just wasn't really working for him. There were some things to point to with Charlie Morton to say, man,
right.
Okay, hoping for the best here and hoping that he eats innings. And he did turn things around in Baltimore. All credit to Charlie Morton. But this is different. It was a good 2025 for Chris Bassitt. 32 games, 31 starts, a 3.96 ERA. He was also a dog in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Made 7 appearances as a reliever. He wasn't actually a starter in the playoffs, but he gave up 1 total earned run, 10 strikeouts, 2 walks. He was in some really high leverage spots against the Dodgers in the World Series. There was certainly no sign of decline from Chris Bassitt. But he is a floor raiser. I think that's the reality of a signing like this. Where does he elevate your ceiling? I think so, for probably more reasons that we'll get into in terms of what it does for the rest of your rotation. But he is a floor raiser. It's probably not going to be an elite ERA, but it's going to be a good ERA. In his 32 games last year, he allowed 4 earned runs or fewer in 28 of them. So only 4 starts where you were kind of out of that baseball game before you got to the bullpen. He completed at least 5 innings in 26 of his 32 games last year. So it's dependability because he posts every 5th day, and he has done so for a lot of seasons now. And it's reliability because you are very rarely out of a baseball game that Chris Bassitt starts. He's going to limit hard contact, 85th percentile in average exit velocity last year, 80th percentile hard hit rate, is going to keep the ball on the ground, 70th percentile ground ball rate last year.
Yeah, and he's also had his fair share in this division, being with Toronto for the last 3 seasons. Not to mention in 2023, he led the American League in batters faced. So then that's 826. So just kind of having that experience, not only career-wise, just being a veteran in Major League Baseball, but also in the American League East, having seen a lot of batters. He's going to be very familiar with the people that he's going up against in this division. And just like you said, that dependability, the reliability is going to be huge. And not to mention, a lot of unpredictability is going to come from him because he has got a kitchen sink arsenal.
Yeah.
There's 8 pitches: a sinker, cutter, curveball, four-seamer, sweeper, splitter, slider, and changeup. The curveball is especially nasty. It's only used 16% of the time. The sinker is definitely the primary pitch with 42% usage. But the curveball had a 172 batting average against and 293 slugging this past year. So really good stuff from him.
Yeah, and it's not like he just has 8 pitches that he threw like 5 times. He threw
Right.
all 8 of
Yeah.
those pitches at least 75 times last year. So it's probably an uncomfortable at-bat against Chris Bassitt because a lot of the time you just do not know what is coming. And we heard from Pete Alonso down in spring training too, video from Baltimore Banner saying of Chris Bassitt, he's a beauty. I think he's going to be a huge addition for us, raved about the kind of character that he brings to the clubhouse and the postseason experience as well. He is fresh off of a World Series appearance for the division rival Blue Jays. So that's the kind of pitcher he is. It's a veteran presence. Alonso described him as a big personality, which I'm interested to see how that plays in this clubhouse because a lot of those guys who are leaders, the younger guys, they're more on the quiet side. I think of somebody like Jordan Westberg, who is not the most vocal leader in the world, but he is a leader just because of the way he goes about his work day to day. Don't know Chris Bassitt, but from the sounds of things from Pete Alonso, who was his teammate with the Mets, sounds like Bassitt is a little bit more of a louder personality in the clubhouse, which could go a long way here. Veteran presence, solid ERA. He's going to post every 5th day, good strikeout numbers. And he's also shown that he can be a great bullpen piece in the playoffs. Like, if you get to the postseason and your rotation feels crowded, you could move Chris Bassitt into a high leverage spot and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, you have that opportunity for Chris Bassitt. You have that opportunity for Tyler Wells, Albert Suarez. You have a lot of guys that could be a little bit of a hybrid role in 2026. Obviously, you're going to want Chris Bassitt starting in the rotation from the jump because that's what you brought him in to do. But to have that option in the postseason, like you mentioned, and then obviously just kind of eat those innings if he is coming out of the rotation to begin with, because you saw a lot of times last year with injury or you name it where the starting rotation couldn't go deep into the game, and then you'd have the bullpen come out and they were overly exhausted and overly taxed because they had to pick up a bunch of slack when you had starts coming from Cade Povich, Charlie Morton, Tomoyuki Sugano. Obviously that they had some great outings, those 3, but you were also getting a little bit of wishy-washiness from a big chunk of the starting rotation. So hopefully with Chris Bassitt, you get someone not only that can provide relief outings later down the stretch, but also when he is starting, he can eat innings, which is another difference from him with Charlie Morton because he ate a lot more than Charlie Morton did in that 4-year span.
And some of those labels are funny. I almost hesitate to call Chris Bassitt an innings eater, even though he is. He does eat innings, but with all due respect to these guys, again, who were outstanding in Baltimore, he is not a Jordan Lyles. He is not a Kyle Gibson. He is a higher caliber pitcher than those guys, but he does a similar thing in giving you 30-plus starts and going deep into ball games and pitching a lot of innings for you, which is going to be incredibly valuable in this rotation. So let's have the rotation conversation because I think this raises a lot of questions about what the rotation is going to look like in 2026, not in a bad way. You have a lot of additions. You now have Shane Baz, Chris Bassitt, Zach Eflin, who was a re-sign, so I don't know if you count him as an addition or not, but he's back. You have sort of additions in Kyle Bradish, who didn't make that many starts last year, and Trevor Rogers, who missed a majority of the start of the season, was still able to, get close to 20 starts on the year, but you're going to have more starts from him. Saw everybody's favorite Twitter account, if you're an Orioles fan, Executive Burner, that they think is actually Mike Elias, and it's just obviously not, did point out the fact that you are essentially replacing, like you kind of alluded to, Annie, 80 starts of Charlie Morton, Tomoyuki Sugano, Kyle Gibson, Brandon Young, and Cade Povich, with hopefully 10 more starts from Trevor Rogers, maybe 20 more starts from Kyle Bradish, which might be pushing it a little bit, but we'll get into that. And then 50-plus starts from Chris Bassitt and Shane Baz. That is a pretty drastic improvement if you are looking at just those 80 games in terms of what is changing this year.
Yeah, I mean, I just have the picture, at least on my notes, of what the rotation could look like now. what the depth looks like now and then compared to what it looked like last year.
Yeah.
So, for example, I have kind of a loose rotation because who knows what the order is going to be, but Kyle Bradish, Trevor Rogers, Shane Baz, number 3, maybe Chris Bassitt, number 3, Dean Kramer as well, number 5, Zach Eflin on the bubble, or if they go with a 6-man rotation. So that's 6 guys that you have that you can expect to take up a lot of the starts throughout the season if all goes according to plan, no injuries. Then the depth pieces, I have Tyler Wells, Albert Suarez, Cade Povich, originally Chase McDermott, but after yesterday, he said he's probably just going to be a reliever. And was that yesterday? Yeah. Maybe
At some
Tuesday.
point this
At some
week.
point this week. Brandon Young. And so the latter of those 3 guys are ones that you considered in your rotation last year. You had
Right.
Cade Povich, Chase McDermott, Brandon Young. Obviously, Chase McDermott had a bunch of more struggles than the other 2, but Cade Povich and Brandon Young were in your rotation for the bulk of 2025. Then you have in AAA that needs a debut still is Trey Gibson, Nestor Herman, Cameron Weston, and Levi Wells. Feel pretty good about that group of guys in AAA.
Sure.
And if you have Trey Gibson as your number 11, number 12 guy, then that you feel pretty good about that solid group of people to get you through the season when last year you had to count on 16 players, most of which were relievers that were just putting up an opening outing.
Right. The depth feels a lot better right now. Cade Povich started the 3rd most games on this team last year, and that's not a knock on Cade Povich. He showed some really good flashes last
for sure.
season, but you feel better about your rotation when Cade Povich is not starting the 3rd most games out of that group. There are a different caliber of pitcher here right now. Cade Povich can certainly develop into that kind of guy, but there are established starters that are ready to take those starts this year. Brandon Young started the 7th most games out of anybody in this rotation last year. Same sort of thing. Nothing against Brandon Young. He can certainly develop into a reliable, consistent starting pitcher. There are at least 6 guys on this roster right now who are proven and have done it before, and you feel good about where you are with those guys. An addition like Bassitt is an interesting one because as we kind of talked about in a potential Framber Valdez conversation or another starting pitcher ad, it got to the point where it didn't feel like there was anybody that you would want to quote-unquote kick out of the rotation because you had a starting 5 that you felt pretty good about with Bradish, Rogers, as our light randomly changes again. Bradish, Rogers, Baz, Eflin, Kramer. Assuming that everybody was healthy, and we have heard good things about Zach Eflin at spring training thus far. He is a full participant. Assuming health, those are 5 good starting pitchers that you feel solid about going into the season. Of course, we have had the conversation that you need more than just those guys. There are always injuries, but a lot of those moves were depth moves. And Chris Bassitt is not really a depth move. You bring him in to be a starting pitcher. And so now the conversation turns to, well, what do you do when you have 6 guys at least that are capable of starting 30 games and putting up solid numbers? And I think, Craig Albarnez alluded to it a little bit, wasn't able to comment on Chris Bassitt's addition before the addition was official, but he was asked about a potential 6-man rotation, and I do think it's something that the Orioles should strongly consider going into the year because of the injuries that this team has dealt with over the past few seasons. And I don't think you have to look much further than Kyle Bradish at the top of things because look at what Bradish did last year. It was really impressive. He comes back to the big leagues and he looks really good, but between his rehab assignment and his time in the big leagues, he throws 54 innings. It was 54 innings of good baseball, but that's just 54 innings. And unless he's going to go Jacob deGrom and go from 20 innings the year before to 170 coming off of injury, I don't think the Orioles are going to want to push him to throw 125 more innings than he threw last year, or even 110. I think more realistically, assuming the Orioles are going to be careful about Bradish's long-term health. I think that's a given. So I think it's fair to assume that Bradish might jump up 75 innings this year, somewhere in that range. Bottom line, I don't think Kyle Bradish is going to throw a full 170 inning season in 2026. I think it's possible,
right?
But I don't really see it happening.
Listen, I mean, I think with the rotation as it is right now, this whole offseason pretty much, you and I have felt very strongly about the rotation as it looks, especially when you brought in Shane Baz to replace Grayson Rodriguez, who we had no idea if he would even play in 2026, or at least the majority of 2026, and then you bring back Zach Eflin. You and I have thought that the rotation looks way better than it did going into last year. Sure, there are still some question marks when it comes to the health of some of these guys. With Trevor Rogers, not necessarily for health, but can he sustain what he put up in 2025? Kyle Bradish obviously coming back from a major injury. Can he put up what he did last year coming back, but for longer? And then even a Tyler Wells, if he's going to have some starting rotation outings, or not. And with Shane Baz, you have someone that had recently come back from a TJ surgery and puts 14 starts in 2024, the season after, and then 31, or was that? Yeah, and 31 starts in last year. So almost 170 innings pitched for Shane Baz.
Yeah.
You hope that he sustains that kind of health as well, because there are a lot of health question marks, as always, but especially with this bunch of people. But if you can get that out of Shane Baz again for a second year in a row, 30-plus starts again, Kyle Bradish, you're going to have to sustain that a little bit and make sure he builds his way up to durability. Zach Eflin is coming back from the major surgery, like you said. So there's opportunity where you can use Zach Eflin maybe out of the bullpen, or Chris Bassitt, like we said. But the main priority is making sure that everyone stays healthy, and you can do that with 6-man.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a need to push somebody like Zach Eflin to the bullpen, because like I was alluding to with Bradish, you bring up Shane Baz, I think that's a good example. He goes from not pitching to 118 innings between his time in the minors and the big leagues to over 160 innings last year. That is a progressive ramp up for somebody who is still pretty young in his career. You want to look out for his long-term health, and you want to ramp him up progressively. Kyle Bradish didn't have 118 innings last year to get to that 160-plus number. He had 54.
Right.
And so I don't think you're going to push him to 160, 170 innings this year. More realistically, I think you could say 125 innings in the regular season. This is just speculation based on what I think the plan could be for Kyle Bradish. Let's say he gets 125 regular season innings. He was really good in 2023, averaged just under 6 innings per start. That puts him at about 22 regular season starts this year for 125 innings in the regular season. You want to preserve him for the potential playoff run, too. That could be your best pitcher going into the playoffs. Zach Eflin is in a little bit of a similar boat. He has past seasons with a higher workload than somebody like Kyle Bradish or like Trevor Rogers. But again, it wasn't a ton of innings for him last year. You want to build him up a little bit. Trevor Rogers had more innings than either of those two guys last season. It was over 100. Maybe realistically, you could get him to 160, 150 innings next year. But you don't want to push any of those guys past their limits, given the amount of innings that they threw a year ago. And so a way to do that hopefully keeps those guys healthy and keeps 6 guys in the rotation who have been really good big league pitchers for the last few years is to just go with a 6-man rotation. And maybe that's the plan, and then maybe injuries just hit and you have to go back to a 5-man rotation because injuries always hit. But given the fact that everybody is healthy right now, that solution could make the most sense. Yeah,
and a lot different of a conversation, too, to where we were even at some points in last season about, Tyler Wells is coming back, Kyle Bradish is coming back. Do we throw in a 6-man rotation later in the middle of the 2025 season? But at the same time, you had pitchers like Cade Povich, Tomoyuki Sugano in that mix as well. You just feel so much better about this group of 6. Yeah. And again, no hate to the people that were there last year. They've done numerous things, from posting good outings, posting every 5th day like Tomo did. But with this group, you have to not baby them, because they're obviously going to give their own input on if they feel good or not to start every 5th day or whatnot. But you want to preserve them and not overdo it, especially when it's this group.
Yeah, a lot of those guys you almost have to hold back from themselves a little bit.
Right.
Not that there will necessarily be hard innings limits or hard games limits for any of these guys. We don't know what the exact plan is going to look like, but knowing the kind of competitors that all of these guys are, Zach Eflin was pitching through injury for a majority of last season, and he just wanted to be out there and he wanted to be in the clubhouse with his guys. And it might be the kind of thing with competitors like him and Bradish where you're going, okay, yes, glad that you want to be out here all the time, but let's come up with a plan that keeps you healthy down the stretch. And I have seen a lot of conversation too about, just, okay, Dean Kramer, he's a bullpen arm now. It's not that simple. Dean Kramer has been, I think, a much better pitcher than people realize for the past 4 seasons. He has been the staple of the Baltimore staff since 2022. He has been the one that has been here consistently starting, consistently able to stay healthy. He's got a sub-4 ERA in that stretch. It's a 3.95 ERA dating back to 2022, and he's made at least 30 outings starts. He technically had 29 starts last year, and then he came in the second inning because they just used an opener. He's got 30 starts last year. He's done that twice in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
It is not as simple as just taking a guy like that who has averaged 150 innings and a 3.95 ERA for the past 4 seasons and just going, okay, bullpen arm.
Right.
That's a good starting pitcher that you want to find starts for, and I think he's going to be in this starting rotation. I don't see any of these 6 guys just going, okay, bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, Dean Kramer especially. I don't see him getting pushed to the bullpen at all.
I don't think so. I mean, he has appeared out of the bullpen for the Orioles, but that was when he was just coming up.
Yeah.
He's just been good for the past 4 seasons. I know he's not the number 1, number 2 type of guy, but a 3.95 ERA over the past 4 years, and that guy is potentially your number 5 or number 6 if you are in a 6-man rotation, you feel really good about that guy at the back end of your rotation.
And someone in the last 2 seasons who's been the number 3 starting pitcher.
Yeah.
That you've now pushed to 5 or 6, which feels
And he is
incredible.
always capable of going 7 innings, 8 Ks.
Yeah, I was going through his game log the other day.
He's got some gems in there.
I was like, okay, I forgot he had a 7-inning outing there. Oh, yeah. He had another one there,
And some of the depth guys are the same way.
Yeah.
Cade Povich is still a really high upside arm. You were not surprised at all last year when Cade Povich went out and posted 8 strikeouts. Brandon Young had maybe the best start of anybody last year, 8 innings were perfect in Houston until he gives up a dribbler single to Ramon Urias off-platform throw goes into right field. If you want to talk about a flash, that's the flashiest anybody had been for the Orioles. So the depth pieces you now feel really good about because those are high upside arms. Guys like Trey Gibson, Nestor Herman, Jerron Watts-Brown, Levi Wells potentially joining them down the road. And then 6 guys that you feel good about starting baseball games. You feel good about where this starting rotation is at right now. And Chris Bassitt joining that group just raises your floor a ton. 170 innings last year, has thrown 170 innings each of the last 4 seasons. You know it's going to be a good ERA. You know he is going to keep you in the baseball game more often than not. That's a really good group right now.
Yeah. And also just to dive a little bit more into what the stuff looks like and Chris Bassitt as a pitcher, some of the movement on his pitches.
His sweeper is disgusting.
It's insane. It's his highest put-away rate pitch. The sweeper has a nasty vertical and horizontal movement. It had 3.9 inches more vertical drop than like the comparable sweepers or pitches that were thrown with the same kind of, velocity and movement.
Yeah.
And 3 inches more horizontal break than the comparable pitches there as well. So that sweeper looks incredible. The curveball's horizontal movement is crazy, 4.5 inches more than similar pitches. And the sinker had 2.8 inches more of total vertical drop compared to the similar pitches as well. So that's 3 really elite pitch movement characteristics coming out of his 8-pitch mix, which I'm excited to see in Baltimore.
Yeah, and don't discount what a guy like that can do in the starting pitching room as well, where he is entering his 12th season, and he has a lot of wisdom to pass along to guys. He obviously has a lot of pitches that he could, teach to other starting pitchers. They're always tweaking things. They are always going over stuff. It's just a valuable guy to have in the room.
And also, yes, you had the Framber Valdez, the Ranger Suarez on the market this offseason. Yes, we're both aware that those would have been the splash of all splashes to come to this Baltimore rotation this offseason, but you wouldn't have gotten the kind of wisdom and veteran experience like a Chris Bassitt can give and provide to a Trey Gibson if he gets promoted.
Sure.
To any of those guys, even a Cade Povich, Brandon Young too. So I'm blanking on all of them because there's so many good ones. But you wouldn't have necessarily gotten that out of, and maybe you would have, but it's different. You wouldn't have gotten someone that has 11 years of major league experience, postseason experience, someone who can deliver in World Series appearances. And that's going to be huge for these young pitchers to learn from this season.
Yeah, it's different. Chris Bassitt has over 230 games in his career, and there weren't many pitchers available on the market outside of a Verlander or a Scherzer that had that kind of background and pedigree. I know a lot of the conversation has been around Zach Gallen. Zach Gallen is a tricky free agent case. This has always been the scenario with Zach Gallen throughout the offseason. I know probably the market was waiting for somebody like Framber Valdez to sign, but you're talking about a pitcher who has had a tough back-to-back seasons at this point in 2024 and 2025. It's a 4.31 ERA. He has a qualifying offer attached to him as he declined the qualifying offer from Arizona, meaning that if you signed him, you would have to give up a really valuable draft pick, and you have to give up that draft pick plus the monetary value of signing somebody like Zach Gallen in the hopes that he gets back to a form that we haven't seen since 2023. And that's not to say that it's not going to happen. That's not to say that Zach Gallen isn't a really talented pitcher. He is. He has always been a talented pitcher. He was a top 3 Cy Young finisher back in 2023. But you are hoping for a return to form for a guy that is going to command a pretty large contract, and you have to give up a big draft pick for, which the Orioles already did this offseason by signing Pete Alonso, who had the qualifying and thus draft pick attached to him if you brought him in.
Right, and I was just going to point out off of that it's not like they weren't going to go for somebody that had a qualifying offer, because they reportedly had offers to some of those big names in the free agent market, but just knowing how good they are in the draft. I mean, we've seen already the kind of pedigree that they've gotten out of the draft this past draft and drafts before that, and using them for trade pieces my English is so all over the place. Further down the line, and whatever you get at the trade deadline, they are going to use the talent if they can at the draft and the trade deadline, whether to bring them up throughout their own system or use them to go get pitchers or players in the offseason or at the trade deadline, you name it. So you feel great about it right now that you didn't get a starting pitcher at this point in time where you had to give up a qualifying offer or draft pick for that matter.
Yeah, you already gave up the draft pick. I know there's a lot of the conversation of, Mike Elias and the Orioles love their draft picks. A, they do, and you would too if you drafted with the same success that the Baltimore Orioles do. And B, they have shown with the signing of Pete Alonso that if the player and the fit is right, they are willing to give up that draft pick and the monetary value of a big contract to go get that caliber of guy to add to this team. But overall, this starting rotation looks a heck of a lot better than it did last season. You were going into 2025 with your number one as Zach Eflin. Grayson Rodriguez was hurt in spring training, so your rotation going into that point was Dean Kramer, it was Cade Povich, Charlie Morton, Tomoyuki Sugano behind Zach Eflin. I think it's pretty safe to say that Kyle Bradish, Trevor Rogers, given what he did last year, Shane Baz, Chris Bassitt, Zach Eflin, and Dean Kramer is a sizable upgrade from that.
I mean, you even had to use people out of the bullpen last year to put up starts.
You had to use everybody last year.
Dietrich Enns had one. Scott Bluette had one. Rico Garcia had one. You brought in Kyle Gibson. Everybody knows how that went. Albert Suarez, Chase McDermott. You just used 16 pitchers last year to put up a start in 2025. This year, if you have that 16 as well, which hopefully the luck is a little bit different in 2026, then your depth is Trey Gibson, Nestor Herman, Cameron Weston, Levi Wells, Jerron Watts-Brown. That's a good group of prospects that you can use.
Yeah, they got really lucky with injuries back in 2023 when they won over 100 games. Obviously, you need a little bit of luck to win over 100 games. They had a ton of position players healthy. 10 guys played at least 100 games. And then in the starting rotation, you pretty much just had 8 guys make starts. Keegan Aiken, I think, made an opener start somewhere in that season. But it was essentially just John Means that went down with injury. You made a deadline deal to go get Jack Flaherty. Cole Irvin made some starts. Tyler Wells was bounced a little bit between the bullpen and the starting rotation, but you had 3 guys make 30 starts. Grayson Rodriguez came up that season and put together a nice year. I don't know if you're going to get that lucky again.
Right.
It would be really nice if you pretty much only have to use 8 starting pitchers throughout the year, but we're talking about 6 that you feel really good about, plus a handful of prospects, plus Povich and Young that already have big league experience, plus Tyler Wells and Albert Suarez that might start the season as bullpen arms, but could make starts if needed and could be stretched out. That's a lot of depth, and it's a lot of upside because you have Bradish and Rogers and Boz that at their peak could be top 10 Cy Young type of pitchers in the American League. So with the addition of Bassitt, I think you feel really good about where the Orioles are at on the starting rotation front. In terms of other moves to come and what the Orioles still need to do, it is spring training. And so continuing to talk about free agent acquisitions and trade acquisitions, it's not silly, but we're going to see less of that because we are starting to get into the season. Hopefully there are not more injuries that are going to hit this team, and so they don't need to go out and make an acquisition here or there. There are some log jams at positions that could be cleared by injury. They could be cleared by trades. Who knows? So I don't think the door is closed on Orioles moves. But in terms of an off-season checklist, getting another high-quality starting pitcher was probably the highest up on the list of the boxes that were remaining. And I think there was a pretty sizable gap between that and the next thing, which I guess would maybe be another lefty bullpen arm.
Right.
To join Keegan Aiken and Dietrich Enns and potentially a Grant Wolfram. I think that's maybe technically still on the list, but it's not that high on the list because I think you could go into the season with this current bullpen with some of the names that you have depth-wise there too and feel solid about where you're at. So I guess it's still on the priority list, but priority almost feels like too strong of a word there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they are done, but I feel content with it being done, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I know that there's going to be a lot of answers sought out this spring training for some of those depth pieces, whether they're going to start in the bullpen opening day or whatnot, or even for the starting rotation, who's going to be kind of on the bubble or pushed to the bullpen, you name it. But I think that with the way it is right now, let's say, like, I wouldn't have been upset if they didn't go out and get another starting pitcher because I liked the starting rotation even before Chris Bassitt. But now I don't feel as though I would be upset if they didn't get another signing in general.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. This feels like kind of a stamp on the Orioles offseason. This is a significant move that improves your starting rotation in a significant way.
Right. And even before the Chris Bassitt signing, like I was seeing on a lot of publications, or who are the biggest winners, losers of the offseason, the Orioles were still a winner by far and away, just purely probably because of Pete Alonso. And that is going to be huge for this position player group, the lineup 1 through 9. Hopefully you can get Jackson Holliday back as soon as possible, but if not, you have some depth pieces there. Hopefully we see Kobe Mayo kind of shape into some first base appearances, but maybe even third base. There's a lot of answers to be discovered, but I think that when it comes to the roster itself and the clientele that you have, you feel, or personnel rather, then you feel pretty good.
So you're saying there's a lot more to talk about on the Bird's Nest moving forward.
There always is, Brendan.
Nice plug, Annie. I think that'll just about do it for this week's episode of The Bird's Nest. Thank you so much for following along with us on YouTube and Facebook for this breaking news edition of the podcast. We love doing these. It usually means that something good happened.
Yeah.
I don't think we do these as frequently when something bad happens because
That's a good point.
That's
Good way
a
to look
way
at
less
it.
fun podcast. So
Yeah.
breaking news podcasts are very fun. But if you didn't follow along with us live on our YouTube and Facebook, you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us here on The Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Bobby Blanco behind the scenes for producing this one. For Annie Klaff, I'm Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.